Hi, my name is Ed Kreitman, and I'm making a video tonight for my good friend Helen Brunner, another violin teacher in the Suzuki movement. She lives in London, and I recently got an email from her one night saying, or I think it was a text saying, "Quick, tell me how to make the risotto." Well, of course, it is impossible to show her how to make risotto in a text or an email. So I decided I would just, was going to make risotto tonight, and I thought, oh, I'll just set up the camera and I'll give Helen a little step-by-step. So here we go, Helen. For me, cooking is all about relaxing and enjoying the experience. There's never anything stressful about fixing food for me. I love every aspect of it. I love looking at recipes. I love going to the grocery store. I love shopping. I love bringing the food home. I love the prep. Love the cooking. And of course, I love to eat whatever I made in the end, if it's turned out okay. So we're going to open a little bottle of Chardonnay here. Here's to you, Helen. So the risotto I'm making tonight is the one that I make most often. It's my favorite one. This is actually a recipe from Mike Cutter, my good friend who lives in Boston, who, Helen, you have met when he came to visit London last year. This is a very classic risotto. It has shrimp, it has spinach and basil. Those are the main flavorings. But to get the risotto started, I'm going to move the wine out of the way so you can see a little better what I'm doing here. I've already done a little bit of prep work. We're going to use a basic chicken stock for the broth of the risotto. But to give more flavor to it, I started by sauteing some shallots, a little garlic, some celery, and I took the shells from the shrimp and I sauteed all of that together in a pan. Added a little bit of white wine to it, and then I strained that to take away the solids, and added that liquid, that little bit of seafood shrimp broth, to the chicken stock, which is going to give it a little bit more of a shrimp flavor and give a little bit more robust flavor to the broth. I brought it just to a boil, and then now I'm going to just let it simmer a little bit. And the shrimp, which I prepared earlier, these are the shrimp that are like 16 to 20 shrimp per pound size, and I shelled and deveined these, and then I cut them into thirds, so the size of the piece is kind of a nice bite. And these are just going to get tossed into this hot broth, and they'll stay for a few minutes to cook, and then I'll strain them out with a slotted spoon, and we'll set that aside. And then we're going to use this as the broth for the risotto. So let me put this back on the stove, and I'm going to get it just to be on a simmer, and then I'm going to add the shrimp to them. They'll stay in there for maybe 2 or 3 minutes. In the meantime, I'm going to get my onions ready. So I have an onion here that I cut off one end, and then I sliced it down the middle. I've cleaned the edge. Now I'm going to cut this onion 2/3 of the way through here like this, and then I'm going to chop. This is going to give me oh, I forgot to make another slice. I forgot to make the cuts that go this way. And this is going to give me a pretty decent dice on my onion. I'm just going to chop this up a little bit because I didn't make that other cut before I sliced those up. But now, move this out of the way. take this part of the onion and dice it up a little bit. You know, I'm a violinist first, and then I love to cook. So I'm very, very cautious with my knife. I do not want to cut myself. So I'm not quick. I don't aspire to have a fast cutting technique. So I'm going to do the same thing on this one that I did on the other one. I'm going to peel this. And then we'll make those cuts. We're going to make a cut about a third of the way through the bottom, and about a third of the way again. And then we'll make some cuts into it going this way. I don't have to teach Helen how to chop an onion because she's actually been to cooking school. She knows how to cook. She's really just interested in my recipe for the risotto, which I think I made in her kitchen a few times. Oh yeah, many times, now that I think about it. And I'm going to get my shrimp out of the broth. It smells great. Chicken broth, but there's a lot of shrimp flavor. It's amazing how much more shrimp flavor you get by sauteing those shells in the aromatic vegetables. Makes a big difference. So I'm just getting all my shrimp out of here, and then we're going to start the risotto. So a few other things I'll need to get ready first. This is going to have some spinach. I just buy the spinach that's already chopped and cleaned, so I'm not fussing with that. And we're going to need to do a little bit of cleaning up on the basil over here. And we're going to have to get some white wine, but we've already opened the bottle, so that's ready to go. And now this broth is one of the important things about making a risotto. We're going to keep this broth on the burner and let it just be at a really slow simmer so that as I'm adding it to the risotto, it's nice and hot. We don't want this to cool down. Okay, so I have everything ready to go before I start the risotto. I have a cup and a half of the arborio rice measured out. I've chopped some basil. I have a half cup of Parmesan cheese. I've diced my onion. I have 3 cloves of garlic minced, and I have a half cup of white wine. And then the package of baby spinach, which has been cleaned and prepared, which I bought from the grocery store. So all of this is going to go into the risotto, and now we're going to move over to the stove and get that started. So before I begin the risotto, it's important to make sure that everything else you're having for the meal is ready, because when the risotto finishes, you want to be able to serve it right away. I usually make this dish with a salad of some kind. Tonight I'm going to make a spinach salad, kind of play on the spinach in the risotto. And I'm going to make a honey mustard dressing to go on that, and then I'm going to just have a little blue cheese and some dried cranberries and nuts. And I think that's probably going to be it. But I'm going to make sure that all of that is done before I start the risotto, so that when I'm ready to serve, everything's going to be ready at once, and I'm not stopping at the last second to make a salad dressing or to put the salad together. So now I'm just going to put together my honey mustard salad dressing. And for this I'm going to use about 3 tablespoons of good honey Dijon mustard. So I'm going to put that in my measuring cup. That's about 1, 2, 3 tablespoons. And then I'm going to do an equal amount of honey. So that's about 1, 2, 3. If you're not good at eyeballing, use the measuring spoons. Then I'm going to put a little bit of red wine vinegar, maybe 2 tablespoons. and some olive oil, about 1/4 cup. And it looks like this is a new bottle I need to open. So let's add that. And then I'm just going to whisk this all together, and I'm going to season it with a little 1/2 teaspoon of pepper, maybe a 1/2 teaspoon of salt. Let's taste that. Oh my gosh, that's delicious. All right, so I think we're ready to start the risotto. So I have my large Dutch oven on the stove. And I know you have one just like this, Helen, because we bought it together. So I'm going to put this under medium-high heat. And then I'm going to add a few tablespoons of olive oil. Enough to coat the pan and the onions that are going to go in. So I'm going to wait for the olive oil to heat up a little bit, and then I'm going to add my onions, and I'm going to saute them for 10 minutes or so, and then I'll add the garlic, and then I'm going to toast the arborio rice before we start to add any liquids. This is the part of the process that takes the most amount of time, and it's what I love about making risotto, because you're standing at the stove and you're stirring it. And some people are like, oh, I hate doing that. I want to have a risotto recipe where you put it in the oven or you finish it some way. I love this. This is my favorite part. For me, it's like therapy to stand and stir the pot, watch that arborio rice go from being, toasted, uncooked, to a really wonderful al dente texture, and the creaminess that it creates as you get closer and closer to it being ready to serve. So that's fun for me. Just waiting for this to get a little hotter. Then we're going to add the onions. So this is where you want to make sure that you have your glass of wine at hand, because you're going to be here for a little while. So that's the fun part. In my kitchen, I feel really fortunate that I have a great cooking space, but my chopping center is just here to the right of where my stove is. So when I'm transferring food back and forth from my cutting board, sometimes I just bring the whole cutting board over here once I've prepared everything. In fact, I think I'll do that tonight. That's going to make everything a little bit more convenient. But a lot of times I'm just transferring across that little aisle. And when I do that, I love to use this tool. It's really for baking. It's for cutting the dough. But there's a TV chef that I really enjoy watching. Her name is Anne Burrell, and she uses this all the time when she's transferring things. So I'm going to just grab a big scoop of onions. There we go. I hear the sizzle. It tells me the oil's hot. I'm ready to go. Get the rest of my onion in here. I think the recipe calls for 1.5 cups of chopped onions, and I just cook one large. I chop up one large onion, and that always seems to be about the right amount. So my onions have been going now for about 8 minutes. They're just starting to brown. They're looking really good. And so I'm going to add my minced garlic. And I'm going to give them about a minute to cook. It doesn't need a long time. Then I'm going to add my rice, and I'm going to toast the rice. This is going to get all mixed in, coated with the oil. And I'm just going to keep stirring this, and I'll let the heat do its thing. And stir it around. It's going to take a few minutes. And then we'll be ready to start adding the liquids to it. I think this is a really important step. Toasting the rice before we start adding gives the rice a little bit more depth of flavor before we start adding the liquid to it. Okay, so the rice looks like it's nicely toasted, and the onions and the garlic are continuing to brown up. So now I'm going to add the half cup of white wine. I'm going to swirl that around, kind of deglaze the pan a little bit. And there's just exactly the sound that I want to hear. And that cooked off really quickly. And so now I'm ready to start adding my ladles of stock. So I'm going to bring I'm going to just turn this Dutch oven a little bit, and I'm going to bring my stock pot a little closer, and then I'm just going to ladle in a nice ladle of stock, and I'm going to give it a stir and just move this around a little bit. You know, if the temperatures are just right, it's just bubbling up and it's going to cook down. And we just keep adding more rice. And this is probably going to go on for about, I'm going to say 15 or 20 minutes. Just let that cook off a little bit. And when it starts to get a little dried up again, add another ladle. Okay, Helen, so we have about 10 minutes still to go, but you can see how the rice has really increased in volume. And I'm just, I just set my timer for 25 minutes, and I just keep doing this. And it seems to work out pretty well every single time. So I'm just going to add another ladle, stir it around. It's not like you have to constantly stir it, but you just kind of get it all mixed in like this, and then you just wait for it to cook down until you're ready to add the next ladle of broth. But I stay close to the stove because you don't want anything bad to happen. Actually, I had to run Marvin outside for a pee, but I was able to do that when I just put a ladle in and got it all ready like I just did now, and then I had about 3 minutes to take him outside. Right, Marvin? So you see I let it bubble up a little bit, then I give it a little stir around, and then I let it do that again. So you kind of stay close. You don't want it to stick or burn on the bottom. And that's very easy to do. I've done it. I mean, really, in terms of difficulty, there's just nothing hard about this dish. It's really easy to make. It's just a matter of staying with it and kind of minding it as it's cooking. And you know, if you have guests, if you're making it for a party, they kind of hang out with you in the kitchen anyway, so you might as well, you know, sometimes I'll say to somebody, here, you stir it for a while. And if they love to cook, they'll get into it. And I can go off and, you know, set the table or do something else I might need to do. But mostly, it's pretty easy to attend to. So I'm at my 25-minute mark. My timer has just gone off. So I'm just going to test the risotto to see how al dente it is. Then if it's cooked enough, then I can go on to the next step. I think it needs one more ladle of broth and it's going to be ready. So I'm going to go ahead and give it one more. Here's my timer. And when this one's cooked down, we'll be ready to add the remaining ingredients, which are the spinach, which will be added in several batches, the basil, the shrimp, and the Parmesan cheese. And then we'll check for seasoning. Now, you probably noticed that since I started making this, I haven't seasoned it at all. Partly it's because I'm using a chicken broth that's not an unsalted chicken broth, so I'm getting some salt in the chicken broth. But also, I want to wait until the Parmesan cheese is in before I adjust the salt. Certainly, I'll add black pepper, because you know me and black pepper. I love that. And that'll come at the end, though. All right, so we finished that last ladle of broth. You can see the volume is definitely increased. And now we're ready to start adding the final ingredients. So we're going to add some baby spinach. We're going to add it in about 3 batches. So I'm just going to toss it in. This is going to wilt up. It's actually going to create a little bit more moisture for the risotto to absorb. Alright, as soon as that's kind of melted down, I'll put in another batch. And that cooks right down really quickly. Right, and then I'm going to add the rest. Toss that all in. Give that a stir. And then the last 2 ingredients, and we're really close to the end now, are the last 3 ingredients. The fresh basil, which will go in next, the Parmesan cheese, and the shrimp. And then we just have to adjust. Here goes the basil. We just have to adjust the seasoning, and we have to adjust the liquid, because I watched a show one time on, I don't know, one of the food channels, I think it was, and it was all about an Italian restaurant in New York. It was sort of a private restaurant, like you couldn't call and make a reservation because actually every table in the place was owned by a family. And they were talking to the owner or the chef or whatever, and they were talking about risotto, and they said, oh, you know, people don't understand about risotto. Risotto should pool on the plate. And I thought, oh, that's such an interesting concept. Here comes the Parmesan cheese. And you're going to see when I put this in, it's going to make it a little bit thick, because the cheese is sort of a creamy, thickening agent. And so I may add a little bit more liquid so that we get that consistency of the risotto pooling on the plate. I love that concept and that idea of the consistency of the risotto. Should be so creamy that it's going to pool on the plate. Now I'm just going to taste. I know I'm going to add some black pepper, but I don't know if I'm going to add any salt. No, I don't think I need to add any salt, but I'm definitely going to add some black pepper. And I'm going to add a fair amount, probably a teaspoon, maybe a teaspoon and a half, because I like black pepper. And I'm pretty happy with the consistency. I might add just a tiny bit of broth to bring this together so that when I plate it, my risotto is going to pool on the plate. And this, now I'm going to add my shrimp at the end. That looks pretty good. I might just let that get a little hotter. I think actually I've turned off my heat, but my Dutch oven is going to stay warm for a little bit. And now I'm ready to make my risotto plate. And I don't know about you, but I think that looks like it's pooling on the plate. And then I'm going to put a little fresh Parmesan cheese on the top. Just a sprinkle. And you know, I might even put a spritz of black pepper at the end. Okay, Helen, that's the shrimp risotto.